right. Hey there, Google Cloud security community. It is great to have you all join us. I'll give you a few moments as people start to trickle in. We are live. Thank you for joining us today. Okay. Before we get started, I'd just like to express my gratitude and appreciation to all of you who join these hands-on technical training events. Thank you, community users. You know, our purpose of these webinars is to bring you the experts that can help demonstrate and answer the most commonly asked questions, topics, and themes that we're seeing in community from support and from our customers, so that we can empower you to get more out of your SecOps tooling and features. Just to note, if you have topics that you'd like us to cover on these events, please feel free to reach out to me in the community, either under community feedback or use our community email, which is gcs-community@google.com. Again, that's gcs-community or GSC, GCS. GSC-community@google.com. And again, thank you for all your support and dedication. A few quick highlights before we jump into today's topic. Check out the Google Cloud Security user groups in community if you haven't already. Just go to the navigation bar at the top and click user groups. It will take you to a page with all the upcoming events. Search your region for the local meetups near you. We're building this program out and plan on adding more in major cities globally. So if you don't see one near you, reach out to me and we'll see what we can do about organizing one. But the value and benefit of these user groups is they're local meetups. You get to meet folks within your region, build your network of individuals also using SecOps, and learn from each other, grow from each other's problems, solutions, ideas, all in these user groups that we're hosting once a quarter. Also, the agentic workshops. If you haven't learned about these, we have a post in community, but I'll also add a link here. These are complimentary hands-on training sessions to give you the practical knowledge to transform your organization's defenses with AI. They're a 4-hour session where we will walk you through some training, and there's a CTF. And even your co-host for today actually presented at the Los Angeles and Chicago workshop. But be sure to check out the link I just added in the chat. Okay, that's enough for promos. Why don't we jump right into today's topic, debugging SOAR integrations in IDE like it's a vibe. And let's meet your co-host for today, Sandy Borneman-Wenzel. Welcome, Sandy. It's really great to have you on today's webinar.
Thanks, Matt. Really happy to be here and hopefully educate. My goal is y'all learn at least one thing. That's usually my goal with these.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll learn more than just one knowing that you're here. For our viewers, why don't you tell us what it is you do here at Google and what you specialize in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the principal architect for retail, and my job primarily is to help and kind of help this ease with their customers. I usually get like a lot of good escalations of like really nitty-gritty stuff when it comes to either troubleshooting or just helping them plan out what does it look like operationalizing SecOps specifically, and just kind of what are the latest and greatest threats and how do we protect against them.
Oh, that's great. So really identifying like specific goals and use cases from our customers and how to help generate those outcomes.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And how did you get started in this field? I'm just curious. What did your career path look like, and how did you eventually land in Google?
Yeah, so mine definitely was not paved, because at the time there was no like college course or certification for cybersecurity. So I bubble it up to being the Jill of all trades and the master of none. So I started in the global financials market, and that's where I became very hands-on from like running cables within the data center, polishing fiber, to virtualization, deploying servers and firewalls and all of that. And then before that, I would say what dipped my toes in was the Navy. So I was naval intelligence, and that gave me, kind of geopolitical awareness of what's happening. Started seeing increasing cyber attacks like after 9/11, and that kind of motivated me to, do good, do what's good, do what's right. Then from there, I jumped over to the vendor side. So I worked for a few firewall vendors and really wanted to help those customers at the time protect themselves, because at the end of the day, we all don't know what we don't know. So better insight, better visibility. How can we actually be proactive in our defenses instead of being reactive? That's a big problem we chase every day. And then I would say I got into consulting. And then as the acquisition was happening with Mandiant and Google, I was with Mandiant. So now I'm here.
Wow, what a path. Sounds like an adventure from learning how to actually put the server systems and environments together to actually understanding the data and information that goes into it, or the people that are trying to break into those environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll date myself, but like I definitely dealt with like a lot of ATM token ring. That was like my bread and butter at the time when I was working in data centers.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you are on our side, and I'm glad you're here to help enable our webinar viewers on how we can better protect against the bad guys.
Yeah, glad to be here.
What do you think your favorite part is of your job today? Like, what are you most excited to work on here at Google Cloud Security?
It's a couple things, actually. The people are absolutely amazing. The team I have, they're absolute rock stars, and they push me every day in bad ways and in good ways, but mostly good ways. They push me to grow. They push me to learn new things. Or, I have really close group where they just drop new links and they're like, you have to go look at this, or you have to read this, or this is awesome. So they're always keeping me up to date and supporting me, especially in this role. And then I would say every day is different. No customer has the same issue across the board. Every day is different. I get to tackle a new challenge. And in this agentic era, it's really interesting space to see not only where Google's going, but like where we're going in product with it.
Oh, one thing I really latched onto there was the people that we surround ourselves with that can help improve our abilities, as well as the products that we're using to do this. And that touches my heart, because it means so much with community, right? The reason why we're developing this community, the reason we have you on today, is to help showcase our expertise, to help the people in this community space to always empower ourselves and get better using these tools, or using tools elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering those questions. One last question, or more like a game that we put together for you,
Yes.
for those that are watching. We have a little challenge for you viewers: 2 truths and a lie. So what we'd like you to do is take the text next to each truth or lie and add that into the chat. Let us know what you think is truth and what you think is lie in the chat. And we'll give you a few seconds here to add those. But then we'll have Sandy explain what is and what isn't. So feel free to post your comments now. And don't be shy. There's no wrong answer here.
No, there's no wrong answer. But it'll be very interesting ones to see what people perceive based on the background I just gave.
Yeah. I love it, Mason. Thank you, Marcella. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah, Matt, there must be something about me, because everyone thinks to know I watch K-pop Demon Hunters. Like, it must be a vibe I give off.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, you really piqued my interest there. I think I'm going to have to check out the show now. Okay. Okay, we've got a few for poems, a few for 2 for 1. For those of you that didn't get a chance to add your comments, we will go ahead and continue to move forward since I know we don't have a lot of time. We want to jump into some other things, but Sandy, tell us which ones are truth and which one is a lie, and maybe give a little insight into those for us, please.
Sure. So yes, I will admit I've watched K-pop Demon Hunters. It's been 7 times now. So it's a movie, it's on Netflix, it's streaming, and it's just super, super catchy. So like if you're like a millennial or you catch your kids watching it, it's just super catchy. And I think me watching it and being familiar with like anime, it's like you literally within the first 15, 20 minutes, like understand monster lore. And they just do such a great job of like outlining that with a great like music soundtrack. And yeah, you end up singing to it. Like first 30 minutes in, you're like, what is this? And then as it progresses, you start singing and like bopping your shoulders. So it's very, very catchy. And then yeah, so I did once find a stash of hamburgers underneath the raised floors in a data center. So I worked in a data center in Center City and they had floating floors. So all of the air conditioning and ventilation came through the bottom. And a certain chain would have 2 for 1 deals where you would get 2 sandwiches for $1. And sometimes the guys in the data center would get very hungry if they were working overnight, or they would just want snacks throughout the day. And they would raise the floors and store their hamburgers there. And we didn't find out about it until we started getting a rat problem.
Oh
So
no.
that was, yeah, that definitely was a real life scenario. So that means the lie
Yeah.
is the poem. And this is actually one of the plots or part of the plot for G.I. Jane, which was very influential to me, especially being in the military and what that's done for women in the space.
Absolutely love it. I was going to ask if you want fries with those hamburgers, but I guess if they were that old, you probably don't want anything that was with
I
those
wanted nothing to do with them. But I will say the data center floors did keep them cool, so they didn't rot necessarily.
Yeah, and I love the G.I. Jane reference. I'll date myself too. It was a very long time ago when I watched it. I just love how that's still relevant today. So thank you for sharing that. All right, well, I know we have a lot we're going to cover, so why don't we dive in? If you wouldn't mind just explaining for those that might not be aware, why is troubleshooting in the IDE so useful if done correctly? And then I'll just let you jump right into this.
Yeah, so IDE provides a safe place to actually look at these errors, build custom integrations, which I will walk through and go through of like why you need to do that. But the fact that this is actually in SecOps and you don't necessarily need a separate environment to do this is very, very powerful as you're working within the platform. So my goal for this webinar was to dip the community's toes into this. Think of this as very much a 100, 200 level. So if you don't know Python or you're not very familiar with it, that's okay. And you're in the right place. I will absolutely do my darndest not to nerd out too hard on y'all. But, kind of start with why would we even mess with this stuff? Why are we opening this can of worms? So as we're customizing the SOAR Python integrations code, it's typically done for 2 reasons. One is debugging. You want to gain better visibility into the code's execution flow and where things may break down. And then the second part is custom fixes. So this is implementing a temporary solution if one of the components are being held up before an official release is implemented or fixed by engineering. Now, of course, there are other reasons like creating custom connectors and integrations, but that's for another webinar if Matt invites me back. So what we're going to go through is, what's in a trace, kind of how to read that, what we're looking at, how we can actually debug with that. And then we'll go from 0 to hero. So that's more of the vibe codiness or the vibe coding part of it. And then I'll walk you through some of support's best practices. So if you get to a stopping point where there's something wrong with like the main train of code and you just have to submit a ticket to fix it for, the greater good for all, what kind of components are needed or what artifacts are necessary in order to do that so you can actually get a meaningful response with that. So with that, what's in a trace? And for those that don't know, in the IDE, this is going to be your, I'll show you in the tool, but it's your integrated development environment. That's what IDE stands for. So if you think about it, if anyone's messed with like Visual Studio Code or any sort of like the JetBrains software packaging, it's essentially a tool for developers to write, run, and debug code in a single interface. So again, there is one in SecOps that I will show you. But first, I'll show you kind of how these errors or issues present themselves. And again, we're going super, super deep first, I promise. I'll pull it back and kind of scale back. But essentially, a Python traceback is generated when an exception is raised in the code. And it's a critical tool for diagnosing these issues, especially within the SOAR integrations. So in looking at this example of a Python traceback, you're going to start from the bottom and work your way up. So the red box I highlighted there, that's the last line of your traceback, and it's the most important line. It tells you exactly what went wrong. And in this example I'm showing you, this type error just means an operation was performed on an object of the wrong type. So the yellow box that's highlighted, that's immediately following that exception, is the actual error message. And this message typically provides valuable context and very specific details about why this exception occurred. So from here, it looks like we tried to convert a bytes object into a JSON string, which is a no-no for those of us that are familiar with Python. So what about the orange boxes and the lines that I have underlined? Well, as we move up in these error messages, these are the sequence of function calls that led to that exception. And these are what we call the stack trace or the where. You will see each call has a 2-line entry. So your first line includes the file name, the line number, the module name. So this gives us an indication of the exact location of the problematic code or where we ran into an issue. Now these pink underlines, that's the actual line of code that was attempted to be executed. So you're probably feeling like, oh wow, I just shoved you into the deep end of the Python pool. So now I'll take a big step back and I'll show you how these traceback errors present themselves in a very simple example first. This also gives me an opportunity to introduce you into that integrated development environment or IDE and SecOps if you are not already familiar. So that's where we're going to start on our debugging. So the screen you'll see here, I am in the job scheduler. And this is one of the places where you'll start seeing errors if a job has failed. So what we're looking at is a very custom integration where we built, in this case, jobs, and you see that it has failed. Now, this is very much a more advanced use case. I'm just giving you an example of how these issues actually present themselves. And as I said, you start from the bottom and work your way up, and it has that same structure we kind of walked through before. So let's see what this actually looks like. And I'll start from our famous little homepage here. So if we go into response, you will see IDE. And that is where we will go to find all of our integrations within the production part of it. The ones that I actually messed with are in the staging environment. And this is one where I actually cloned a few and started messing with the code sequence of kind of what's actually happening here. So you can test these integrations at any time you want, just to make sure you're getting the appropriate response you want, the output, and you'll see that here. We have testing parameters, we have the debug output, which would show us if there's an error or not, or show us if it completed, what the actual sample response would be. So for testing, this does get a little confusing. So we do have scope, which is you're gonna have a couple options here. These are gonna be based on what is actually part of the case. Now, what's a case? Because the next one is now test case, and it's telling me right now there are no available test cases. So in order to actually run these actions in particular, I need to have a simulated case to tie it to, so it pulls in the information of everything I'm asking for within this script, such as the entities, for an example. And then your integration instance, this is going to be that virtualization environment that the IDE is going to spin up to test this script to make sure that it runs. So I will quickly show you kind of how we simulate a case and how we walk through that, just so we can fill this out, run it, look at the debug output, because like I said, we would start simple first. But I think a lot of people get hung up at trying to figure out the test case or simulating a test case. How do we look at scope? So let's just do that real quick. So I'm in cases, and this looks like a good one. Looks like I have a couple entities that I can use as examples for mapping. So what I would actually do with this is go to one of the alerts. I call this the hamburger, no pun intended, from the hamburgers I found in the data center. And I would ingest this alert as a test case. I can choose the environment I want, which this will be important for later. And I'll go through why I have different environments or why you would need different environments. But I'll just simulate it in my default environment because this is all a lab for me. So now that that is simulated, you'll see I have a little notch up here that tells me it's a test. I was able to ingest it. It's now okay, good. So I go back to my IDE. We'll just go all entities. And now I have a test case. So it's going to use or it's going to run the script against this actual test case. And then it's a shared Shodan environment because I have it in my default environment. And from here, I just hit the play button. So it tells me it ran successfully, but it didn't return the expected data that I had. So it tells me to check the debug output. Again, we read it from the bottom up, and it tells me that simple issue, it was expecting a colon in line 41 for this specific function that I'm calling. So if I go in, line 41, okay, yeah, it looks like I did miss a colon. In example 44, I have it, or line 44, I have it. But line 41, I do not. So again, really simple example, but just kind of showing you the flow of how you would work within the IDE in this environment. Now, again, hopefully this is like very simple concept. I'll take you through another one that's a little bit more involved. So I called it the really, really borked one. And we'll follow the same parameters, right? So I'll go through, I'll say, let's do this for all entities. I can use the same test case, which is amazing. And I'll go through and test this. Again, I get the same message, tells me to check the debug output. And here we go. It's a bit of a longer one, but it tells me now that my object type in bytes is not JSON serializable. And I go through and it starts working up and it tells me, you know, the various issues that it had with the code, what lines we're looking at. And the important part is it tells me, if I can find it, the actual function or line. And it's good because it's a suggestion on where I introduce the next thing in the debugging, which are print statements. And print statements are super powerful because it'll go through and have me test the data contents and print the actual output of what that is. And I can add certain key variables or key value pairs so I can print what is actually happening after that line. So if I look in my script, it looks like according to line 18 in test data, me trying to do that, it looks like it wants to do something or it's trying to do something, which I don't quite understand as of yet. So I think we should probably start around here of seeing what's that. So in this, I'm saying, okay, I want you to print debug colon, whatever the test data contents are in this string. So let's see what happens there. And then again, I'll go back, I'll save it, I'll run it. Okay, and I'll check the script. And here's my debug error. So what's cool about this is I actually had it ask to give me a flag of some sort. And it's telling me the test data contents for that debug IP, which it defined here, is a B. And then it gave me the value. So again, maybe I'm like, okay, I kind of get what that means, but maybe I'm not super familiar. So what exactly does that mean? For me, I mean, the B prefix tells me that it's a byte object and not a string. But again, maybe I just want more information. So let's add another debug statement and break this one down even more. So add another one to it. discard, start over here. Okay, so now I'm adding another test type, another print statement. Let's test it and see what I get. Okay, there. So it's telling me again, debug IP class bytes. So again, let's break this one down. I'm using the K for key and V for value, so very simple. But in this example, the key is the debug IP and the value is that 192.168.1.1. The type V will get the data type for each. And then the second part is list comprehension that creates the list of tuples. So the tuple will contain the key and the type of value, which then gives us that class of data. So this output looks pretty similar to the example above, but think of this one as, describing a car. So the first debug statement that I had, or the debug print statement that I had, is telling us it's a red Toyota, okay? The second debug print statement tells us it's a category of a light truck. So again, even though they look very similar, they give us different types of information. So that's kind of what that looks like in an IDE flow, what that looks like within SecOps. But now that's, okay, what does it look like when I start vibe coding this? So what I will do, let's see if I can pull this over more. One of the fun things I like to do is, let's take a screenshot of this and let's see what Gemini has to say about it. So I didn't take a picture of the debug statements because I don't want it to have that context. I definitely don't want to cheat. But let's go over. Let's go over to Gemini and I'll find that screenshot I just took and see what Gemini has to say about it. And I will prompt it. You are a Python developer and ran into this traceback error when you ran a SOAR integration. What does it mean? So it's going to actually, what's really impressive about this is it's actually going to read my screenshot, hopefully. It's going to look through all the traceback errors, kind of like how I walked you through it, and it's going to analyze it for me. Let's see if it comes back with the same results that I explained to you. And while it's doing that, I will kind of pause here and see if there are any questions in the chat. Are we good so far?
We are good so far, Sandy. But I love that you're showing the screenshot and how Gemini can read that. I use that for all sorts of other different use cases too. It's just really impressive and powerful.
Yeah. And again, it's like, instead of me having to like copy and paste and move things over, it's just a simple thing, right? So again, it came back with the same. It's a serialization error. It's exactly what I had in the debug and print statements. And as you saw, I can show you here in the screenshot, I just showed it the traceback call. I didn't show it the output of all the debug functions because I wanted to see, again, double checking, fact checking Gemini. It's always a good thing to do. And it's telling me, okay, yeah, your line here, it's failing. It gave me the specific line. It's failing at line 21 because when I'm trying to execute this test data, it's not in a JSON dump function itself, but with the data that I'm passing to it. So it's actually giving me the traceback, the problem, the exact line, and it actually goes through and tells me how to fix it. So pretty cool, right? I do vibe code, so I would say I have some custom integrations that I've built with this and kind of giving it examples like this, not only a broken ones, but a fixed one as well. So it's pretty cool on like the power of it can do. But why did I do this, or why did I go through all of this? Why did I show you the very, very hard manual way and then showed you the, now I'm turning on the Ferrari and driving down the speedway, super, super heavy? Well, it's a couple things. Once you provide context and structure of like how these fires are built, you start branching off to custom integrations, kind of like I told you in my story. Now, it's not always this easy, especially with LLMs. It's not. So keep in mind, the examples that I provided to you are really level 100, 200, so we can understand traceback calls. They're very small. But the first use case I showed you with one of my jobs failing, there was a lot there. There was just a lot to unpack. So what are some of like best practices when it comes to vibe coding or even trying to debug using an LLM? One of the main key points is provide as much context as possible in your question. As you saw, I kind of gave it like a mini persona and I said, you are a Python engineer. This is the traceback. This is what we're working with. Tell me what's wrong. Because you want the agent to get a full understanding of not only what you're trying to accomplish, but what dependencies may exist. Because as you see here, it's telling me about like different virtualization environment variables and classes of my objects that may not exist in this script itself. Because again, I only gave it a little snippet of the traceback, right? I didn't give it the full script. So it's making a lot of assumptions. And I found with LLMs, they are absolutely confidently incorrect most times if you're not giving it the proper context or even like the full script. So understanding what those dependencies may exist. And again, I've used it quite a few times where I presented it a problem in a very short-sighted view, a more complicated problem, and it goes willy-nilly in just some complete different direction. And it'll start hallucinating functions that even don't exist in Python or don't exist or not supported in the SOAR integrations. And again, being that confidently incorrect, and the code results is it starts to really drift away and misinterpret what my original goal was. So this is really where prompt engineering is another key component. It's how you ask the LLM to kind of define what you're doing and doing this in a very repeatable way. So the results you get are more turnkey versus having to ask a follow-up and having to ask a follow-up and drilling into it more. Because that's another thing that happens is the more you stay active within a session versus just doing the bottom line up front and giving everything kind of ahead of time, is that you start going through what's called the context window and you start inflating that, and it starts getting really, really loopy. So that's why I said it's really good to just, instead of having that more dynamic conversation of, oh, look at this bit, then look at this bit, then try with this bit, it's giving it all up front, saying, here it is. So let me go back to see what happens, where if I give it the whole entire snippet of code, if it'll actually fix it. Because again, it gave me some recommendations, but I'm not sure if I trust it. So here is the entire snippet of code. Please be specific and what lines I should fix or where the traceback error occurs. And then for this one, I'll actually use Canvas. So it'll give me a nice side-by-side into how it's going to build and populate that code. So those are just some of like the best practices and kind of key components that we're working through, or especially my experiences. If you have other experiences you want to share, definitely post them in the chat. I'm always open. You know, my way is not always the right way. Although some of my coworkers would say most of the time it probably is. But yeah, so like I said, it has a side-by-side. It's looking at the code. It's giving me kind of what happened. I added the print debugs, but let's see what it comes back with. So it's actually telling me to stop here. So it found the error immediately within the few lines of code, and it's telling me here's your erroneous code. So on line 17, I encode the IP address string into bytes, and that contains the test data. So as I'm going through this, saying, okay, here's your corrected code. Here's what this looks like. And it just removes the method, which is the right thing to do. Because with most likely it being test data, someone probably hard-coded that in there just to test it in their own IDE to see what results would happen, and they use the wrong type. So again, it's very, very powerful if you can use it correctly, and it tells you kind of what to do and where to look. But again, I kind of drug you in the trenches with me a little bit, so that way you have an understanding of those traceback calls, because the first thing I would do is fact check, right? We always want to fact check. We always want to make sure it's not hallucinating and making up functions. So being able to just go through the same steps that the LLM would go through and say, okay, how would it look at this? How would I be able to kind of troubleshoot this myself? And how would I be able to, again, fact check what the output is before I put this into production? So again, I don't think that vibe coding is going to replace like software engineering or replace developing of applications, but it's definitely going to assist, especially if it can help us, or someone who maybe is not super Python experienced, learn and explain at a very simple level of what's happening within the code and what's going on. That is all that. So we went through debugging. We went through from zero to hero, showing you vibe coding with Gemini. Now support best practices. So I kind of went through this very, very naturally, and this is just me with the background that I have. But the first thing you want to do is when you're going to mess with any of these things, you see that there is a lock to them. So that means that they're part of the main code train, the main component, and you shouldn't be editing these because this is what's distributed in the marketplace for everybody. So the first thing you want to do is you do want to clone these. So let's see, this was the main one. You'd go to the hamburger and just duplicate the item. First and foremost, that's what you want to do before you start messing with any of the code, anything of that up front. And then again, you can make your edits as necessary. The other thing I did was I'm in a staging environment. So this is all staging. I can push it to production when it's ready or when I fix it, but you always want to work on this in a staging environment. And then the next part is you saw I had a couple environments set. So I have like my default environment. I had one that was for what we call our demoverse, and I had a few others. Always have a separate environment that's very similar to a sandbox, whatever you want to call it. But that's an environment that is not part of the default environment. And that way you can separate out once you start plinking and playing around and building like more complicated or more custom integrations. So you're not impacting the main train of code. And that does bring me to another point is when you're able to identify that relevant section in debug, that's super important. So again, working on figuring out what are those traces. So I know I clicked around a lot. Again, subconsciously, I follow a lot of these best practices already, but for our amazing support folks who have already recommended, again, duplicate your component no matter what it is. So in mine, there are actions, but you can duplicate connectors, you can duplicate certain steps. So there are many, many components that you can duplicate, even a job. Again, thankfully, most of them are locked for editing, but if they are not, just duplicate it anyway, because there are some versions of beta integrations that do get released if you want to test early. But again, if we want to go ham sandwich on any of that code, this ensures that we are not altering the original version that does end up being distributed. So when we identify that relevant section in bug again, we have a better understanding of those tracebacks. We can pinpoint that relevant section to add our print statements to that function so we can further inspect it and format or display what our response back is from the API when we send out that request. So just being able to, like I said, we found it, it said test debug, it called it out specifically. It's just being able to kind of pinpoint that so you know where to put your print statement. And test in the IDE. So make sure to thoroughly test that duplicated component and validate your behavior and your expected outcome. Did it fix your issue? Were you fixing an issue? Does it achieve your objective? Did you want to add a little bit more to it? Did you want to make it better? Did you want to make sure that, in this use case, it was a DNS reverse for IP addresses? Maybe I want to add host names. Do I want to build on that integration? Just make sure it achieves your objective, and you're able to do it by testing this through that IDE. And lastly, if you do have a support case open or you end up needing to open a support case, make sure to attach all of the artifacts and fun things we learned into the ticket, because this will help our amazing support folks better understand, identify, and potentially replicate the issues so they can route it to engineering more efficiently. So even for us, the more context we have, the quicker the turnaround time could be to publish to the main version if necessary. Now, I did see some questions in the pre about like, okay, this is great, but is there any sort of like CI/CD where maybe I can sync all of this and kind of work offline in my own IDE, whether that's JetBrains or within Visual Studio Code? Yes, there is actually a get sync function or a get sync integration where you can essentially migrate all of those assets, the connectors, the jobs, the actions into a Git, and you can manipulate, you can actually have change control, you can have revisions. So that is absolutely an option that's available. It'll pull all the asset information into a repository, and then again, you can sync with it, work with it. manipulate it that way. This is one we use internally for all of our custom integrations that we build here. And then if you're just wanting to look more into how do I use the IDE, what are the different functions, what's the validation that it does, how do we create custom managers, that documentation is available as well. So that's all I got.
Sandy, we do have, thank you so much. That was amazing. We do have another question in the chat. What is your preferred IDE outside of the SecOps IDE for coding?
Yeah, so it depends on what I'm doing, right? So if it's Python or anything Python specific, I really like JetBrains for like IntelliJ or PyCharm. Anything else, it's usually Visual Studio Code, and that's mainly because of the extensions and the marketplace that's available in there. The things I was showing you with like hopping around between Gemini or even other models, they're available as extensions within VS Code. So that one is just super simple and super local for me to run.
Great, awesome. And then I appreciate you sharing these resources here. Matthew Franz, thanks for posting that link to the GetSync documentation. Any other questions for our viewers that are online here today? Okay. Well, Sandy, this is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us the expertise, your expertise on IDE and troubleshooting here using Python, and even leveraging Gemini and other ideas for how to prompt appropriately for using LLMs. If we don't have any other questions, that's going to wrap it up, community. So thanks for joining us for another community webinar. A huge thank you to our co-host, Sandy. And as always, and yes, Sandy, we will definitely have you back. Would love to learn more about your custom integrations. And then, of course, super grateful to all of you that continue to join us on these live streaming events. Thank you for your support. We will post the webinar after we're done here to community under webinars and podcasts, which is in the resource center in the navigation bar. If you didn't get your answers, our questions answered today, or you think of questions later on, please go to the post and then add your comments, and appreciate every one of you. Let's go out there and show the bad actors what we're made of using Google SecOps. And until next time, hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great week.